All right. Well, if you're just joining us this week, we are in the second part of a series called Undisturbed. Undisturbed. And we're talking about this idea of peace. Peace. And so here's where we started last week, all right? And maybe we can go back there and think about this again. 2021, remember? 2021 just happened a little while ago. Kind of rough, but we made it through. 2021. If you had to describe 2021 in one word, remember, if you were here last week, how would you describe it? Really, think about it. Rough. We asked this question on Instagram, and we got some very creative answers with a lot of creative ways of expressing feelings. But they were pretty much all negative, you know? It was like rough, difficult, challenging, hard. One person just wrote, ugh. Like 2021, really bad. I just heard a comedian just a couple nights ago, actually. He was like, you know, when you have a baby, like a newborn baby, and you wake up in the middle of the night to feed and change the baby, right? And you feed the baby, you put a new diaper on, right? Get everything. Middle of the night, you're exhausted, you're ready to go back to sleep. You like put the baby down, and then as soon as you do, you hear the baby fill the diaper again, you know? He was like, yeah, that was 2021. I was like, that's pretty good. So it was rough. It was rough. Now, imagine this time next year, right? We're in the beginning of 2023, and you're looking back on 2022. Imagine if you could honestly say that through all the challenges, because there will be some, through all the unexpected events, because there will be some. Through maybe some of the loss, because there might be some. Through the ups and downs. Just imagine if you could honestly say, looking at 2022, for me, personally, I would describe that year with the word peace. Peace. Like peace on the inside for me, in spite of what might be happening on the outside. Could you imagine that? Could you imagine that? And so the question is like, what does that actually look like? How do we get there? And really, if that's attainable, like what would you be willing to do to get there? To be able to say like, yeah, while everything was happening, I was just unrattled. I was just okay. And so last week what we did was we unpacked that a little bit. And we said, okay, well, what does it mean actually to then have peace? What does that mean, right? What is peace? And it's interesting. Most of the time when you look up the word peace, it's defined by what it's not, right? Like think about it. We all know what peace is, but when you have to explain, it's like, well, I guess like it's, there's no violence, there's no conflict, there's no fear, there's no worry. It's like defined by what's not there. In fact, if you ask your friend Google to define peace, she says it's freedom from disturbance. That's where we got the name of this series from, freedom from disturbance. If you look at the way like the ancient Hebrew described peace, it was this word shalom. Maybe you've heard of it before. But rather than describing it as what's not, it's like this sense of wholeness, right? Like everything is just right. Undisturbed. Like I told you last week, like a brand new jar of peanut butter, Everything's just, you don't even want to touch it. You don't want to go in. It's just nice, like peace. A puzzle with all the pieces, just right, satisfied. But like I said, we often describe peace by what it's not. And so if peace really is freedom from disturbance, then the path to peace, the way to find peace is by removing the disturbances, right? And so we came to this question, well, then what really disturbs your peace? What disturbs your peace? And we listed off a bunch of things. And last week, what we said is really one thing that often we don't associate this with peace. One thing that really disturbs my sense of internal peace is my own pride. Pride. We define pride as this ruthless, sleepless, unsmiling, joyless, like concentration on the self. Everything becomes about me. Remember the ladder? It's all about like who I am and what I'm worth. And that's exhausting. That's exhausting, and that will steal your peace. Or the way we said it was, when you let pride in, you push peace out. There isn't room for both of those things. And so we unpacked that for a while. You can check it out. It's online if you want to dig a little bit more into pride. But this week, we're asking the same question. What disturbs your peace? And we're going to be looking at something else. So I mentioned last week that a few weeks ago, my wife and I, we went on it was a work trip, but we went to Miami, and it was nice, great weather. I won't say anything else because I don't want to disturb your peace, but it was great. And we, the traveling process wasn't so great, but it went pretty smoothly. We made it to Miami. The plane landed, on the runway. Everybody clapped for some reason. And then, the pilot gets on. He's like, all right, so there's someone in our spot where we're supposed to park the plane, And so we just got to wait a couple minutes. And everyone's like, oh, all right, And then he gets on a couple minutes later, and we're still sitting there in Miami on the plane, We're sitting there, and it's like, so there's a plane in the place where we're supposed to be, and that plane's having problems, so they're not going to be able to move it. And now we're like, oh boy, and you can just feel the peace being disturbed on the plane because we're right there. It's not like we got to get up in the air. We're there. And people are like, just let us out. Just let us out. There's this feeling of being trapped. It was just, personally, it wasn't horrible. There's worse situations, right? But personally, I felt kind of trapped. And for me, that's one of those things that disturbs my peace. When I feel trapped, my peace is disturbed. When I feel mistreated, disturbs my peace. When I feel disrespected, that disturbs my peace. When someone cuts me off in traffic, disturbs my peace, And then you see them at the light, you pull up next to them. It's nice, Or however you express yourself. Disturbs the peace, right? What disturbs your peace? Today, we're talking about anger. Anger. Now, I just have to throw this out there. I think, especially if you know me, you know that me being up here does not mean I've mastered any of the things that we talk about, right? If that were the case, if I had to master something for us to talk about it, we'd have nothing to talk about. And this is one of those things where it's one of those weeks where I'm like, oh, we're talking about anger. And so it's on my mind, and I am shown over and over and over again how often I lose my patience, how often I fall short. And so if you've ever acted in anger, right, I am right there with you. But really what's happening in anger with us, and if you've been with us for the past year or so, with all the stopping and going and whatever, we define anger really when I am angry. What's happening is I'm not getting what I want. It really comes down to that. There is an unmet desire, right? And so I'm trapped on a plane. I want to get out. I'm not getting what I want. I'm angry. I am mistreated. I don't want to be treated that way, so I'm angry. I'm disrespected. I don't want to be disrespected, and so I'm angry. I wanted this to go a certain way. It didn't, and so I'm angry. And so if peace, right, if peace is this feeling of just right, well, anger is what happens when something wrongs my just right, right? It disrupts it. It really comes down to an unmet, an unfulfilled desire. And so in that, if that's how we understand anger, then anger can actually be a good way to show me what I want. Anger will reveal the desires of my heart, right? If I have some explosion when I feel disrespected, that gets me really angry. Well, it shows me that I really want, maybe even need to feel respected, right? If I get really angry when I feel left out or not valuable or what fill in the things that get you really angry can show you what you really want, whether it's good or bad, right? And maybe there's this little voice in the back of your head that's okay, well, sometimes it's okay to get angry, right? Sometimes there are good things we should be angry about. Sometimes we want something to happen because it's what's best and it's what's right. And when it doesn't, we should have this energy. It's actually energy within us that makes us want to right what's been wrong. And so fine, like hold that thought for a second. Hold that thought. The issue is that when you let anger in, you push peace out. Anger and peace, they just don't live together. They don't work well together. Maybe you know someone who's like really, really angry. I bet they're not like super, super peaceful, right? The two don't coexist. And so then the question is like, well, what do we do? You know, what's the place for anger? We get rid of it completely? How do we handle it? Like what do we do with anger? Well, I've told you that this has been like an issue with myself, losing patience, getting angry, saying things I shouldn't say, like letting my emotions get the best of me. And I can honestly say that I think the passage that has been most helpful for me comes from a guy named James. He was the brother of Jesus, and he wrote a letter that's in the New Testament today. And it is known for its amazingly practical wisdom. Like every day, really, whether you're into church or not, like maybe somebody forced you to come here today and you're just like, just get me at it. Like no matter what you believe, this could be really, really helpful for you. So James is the brother of Jesus. He wrote this thing. This letter, it's actually, a lot of people look at it as the New Testament equivalent to the book of Proverbs, which is in the Old Testament. It's known for its practical wisdom. And he has some really, really great things to say about anger. Here's how it starts, right? He comes to this like pause, this little break in his writing, and he addresses these people that he has come to really care about. People he sees as like family members, right? There's a deep sense of care. He says, my dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Literally, the word is know this. Like if you're a note taker, you write this down. This is the part you don't want to miss. Like wake up, right? Here it is. Here's what he's saying. Everyone should be quick to listen. Quick to listen. I don't know about you, but I'm like quick to do a lot of things. I'm not quick to listen. The word for quick here, it has this idea of like hurrying up or immediately, like the first thing on the list, like your first step, your first instinct, your first reaction should be to listen. And not just like to hear, you know, like just like in one ear and out the other, or just like, you know, like, what? Yeah, okay, got it. You know, it's like where you kind of know. But the idea of listen here in the original language, it doesn't just mean to hear, it means to grasp. Or we could say to understand. To understand. Now think about this. What he's saying is that in our interpersonal like interactions, relationships, at home, at school, at work, on the playground, at the bus stop, we should be quick. Like our first step should be to gain a better understanding. Like before I have to respond to what just came out of your mouth, before I have to voice my opinion or let you know whether I think that's right or wrong or okay or not okay, or well, like just to stop and be like, hold on a second. What's going on here? Like what would lead you or her or him, like to say that? Where did that come? To have a posture of curiosity. And you would be amazed to see how that just kind of like helps things to fall into place. If you've ever had an argument, there might be a few of you in here like me that have had an argument, right? Where like something goes wrong. There's something in between somebody between you and somebody you care about. When that argument or that issue or that conflict is resolved, it happens at the point of understanding, right? When like the two of you kind of relax and decide, maybe it's a week later, a day later, an hour later, a year, but it's like, okay, so what's going on here? And there's a moment where it's like, all right, I see why I don't agree. I'm not saying it's okay, but I get why you would do that. It ends at the moment of understanding. What James is saying is like, what if we started with understanding? Before being like, oh, I don't like what just came out of your mouth. Boom, boom, boom. Just to be like, let me step back a little bit and try and wrap my mind around what's happening here. How many blow-ups would be avoided? How many relationships might still be together? How many like, just think about what would be saved from all the damage that happens in between the angry back and forth if we just like start with understanding. There's this guy, his name's Tim Elmore. I was reading something that he wrote last week, and he said, I think that the greatest human need right now in our world is the need to feel understood. Like someone just gets you. And if you've ever been in a situation where there's like that aha moment, when the person on the other side of the exchange understands you, it is so soothing. They don't have to agree. They don't have to change. They don't have to like do it, but just for them to be like, okay, well now that makes sense. It's like, and so James is saying like, lead, be the kind of people that lead with that. I heard about something called the Indian talking stick. Ever heard about that? It's not like an actual stick that talks, but in some tribes, what they would do is when there was an issue or a problem that would need to be solved, they would take a stick, and the only person that could talk was the person with the stick. And I had heard of that before. Sometimes in like marriage counseling, they'll say, all right, you got to try this. You take the stick, and you can't talk unless you have the stick. I'm like, okay, well, see how long that lasts, right? But what I learned recently is that the person with the stick isn't supposed to give it up until they feel like they have been understood. And then it's time for the next person to talk. Just imagine if we didn't let conversations continue, conflicts continue, didn't move on to topic B until everything in section A was understood. It would change the way that we interact with one another. If we were the kind of people who worked for understanding. And so he says everyone must be quick to listen, quick to understand, intentionally understanding. And then he goes on and he says, from there, slow to speak. This word slow literally means to delay. Just delay what you're going to say. At the very least, delay what you're going to say until you understand. Right? And what's so cool about this is not like spiritual. It's not, super. It's just practical advice. Like, just don't deliver a verdict until you've heard the case. I don't know about you, but if you're like me, like most of my regrets come from things I said, not things I didn't say. And so what if we just became the people that were like, I got the next comment. It's teed up and ready to come out, but I'm just going to delay. Maybe till I understand a little bit more. Maybe just to let things cool down. I'm going to delay my speech. And from there, like there's this natural progression, and here's where we get to anger. He says, quick to speak, quick to listen, understand, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Again, slow to become angry. It's the idea of delaying your anger, pressing pause, let it come later, but just delay it. Slow it down. It's interesting. This phrase, slow to anger, it's actually used to describe God. And in Hebrew, the language of the Old Testament, it means long nose, right? So it literally says like God has a long nose. But it's this idea of like just breathing, long, slow breaths. Like, all right, this may not be going the way I want, but I'm just going to sit and like be unrattled, like unfazed, slow to anger. Now, for me, like I said, this whole passage has been really helpful for me. Like at home, especially, where like most of the conflicts happen, or at work when there's a little bit of a disagreement, or whatever, with close friends. This has been so helpful, like to try and understand and be like, okay, before I speak, let me just see what's happening on the other side. But sometimes I just can't really understand, right? Especially if it has to do with my wife. Like, I was talking to someone in between services. I'm like, yeah, sometimes when we're having a like husband and wife conflict, I feel like I'd never get the talking stick because I like, just don't understand, what's going on. But the great thing about this is that even if you can't totally understand what's happening on the other side, literally delaying anger will make a world of a difference. In fact, in my home, we have like a policy, it's not a written policy, but Allie knows. Sometimes we'll be arguing and I'll just say, listen, I am so mad right now that nothing I say is gonna be helpful. And I just need to go downstairs and organize my tool bench. Like just take a break. And so if you're in a situation, you come home, right? Or your roommate has trashed the place or whatever. You see something that just makes you want to explode and you feel totally justified. Fine. But what if you just said, okay, I'm going to come back in 10 minutes and be angry? You'd be amazed to know just how things naturally diffuse. The fire kind of goes out a little bit when you give yourself a moment to breathe. And so just try that. Like next time you're upset, maybe you don't understand. Maybe there's no one to talk to. Just be like, okay, I'm going to just press pause. I'm not going to say I can't be angry, but for this moment I won't be. And walk away. And so here's my favorite part of the whole thing. He says why. Now I'm a critical person. I like to ask a lot of questions. I need to know why. I don't like to just do things just to do things. And James, being as practical as he is, he tells us why. And he doesn't say like, because it's wrong. It's wrong to be angry. He says, because human anger, your anger, my anger, when I'm not getting what I want. He says, human anger does not produce or to work toward. Like it does not produce, it does not end with, and then he uses this phrase, get ready, he says, the righteousness that God desires. Right? The righteousness that God desires. Now, maybe you hear that, right? And you're like, yeah, well, I don't really know if I care that much about the righteousness that God desires, especially if you don't consider yourself a church person. But I think this concept needs to be rebranded a little bit, right? Like in our culture, when you hear the word righteousness, typically we're talking about someone who is self-righteous. And so the word righteous, we think of somebody who's arrogant and thinks themselves like morally superior to the rest of the world. That's not the idea here, right? Also, the other issue with understanding this concept is that a lot of us have grown up understanding God to be this angry, judgmental, rule-giving dictator who gets to tell us what to do because he's big and we're small. And he's going to, squash us like little ants if we don't make him happy. And that's not the idea here. The people that James is writing to originally in this letter, they believed that God wanted what was best for them. And so they wanted genuinely, not because they were supposed to or felt like they had to, but they genuinely wanted what God wanted for them because they believed that they would thrive. It's like how, remember, Jesus was James's brother. And so like Jesus said, he came to give life and life to the full. And this is what they believed God wanted for us. And so if we need to like make this a little bit more concrete, the idea of the righteousness that God desires, think of a marriage that's like healthy and intimate, close, trusting, one you run to, not one you run from. One you love, not one that you deal with. That's the picture of righteousness that God desires. Think of a friendship, like the kind of friendship that lasts through thick or thin, that can deal with the ups and downs and the struggles of life. But one where the two of you are there for each other, you can trust each other. That's a picture of the righteousness that God desires. Think of a way that maybe you handle people that are difficult, that are hard, that you're not like thrilled when they walk in the room. Like the righteousness God desires is a way that you handle those people that you are proud of and that people respect and admire when they see from a distance. Like it's a picture, it really is a picture of what we want. And so if you step back, right, and we get through like the language, really what James is saying here is that when we act on our anger, it will not lead us to what we want. It won't help. Or we could say, like, if anger shows me what I want, anger will show me what I want, but it will not get me what I want. It just doesn't help. It never helps the situation. When I was in ninth grade, a season of my life when I was just like, had a habit of making fantastic choices. I was playing my friend in one-on-one, right? I played basketball, and now my friend and I were extremely competitive. We were so competitive that we refused to play one-on-one because neither one of us wanted the other one going to school saying I beat him. And so we were like, all right, we just won't talk about like who's better or what. And so we wouldn't play. We'd play horse, play 21, play, lightning, knockout, whatever. Wouldn't play one-on-one though. Well, one day we played. And to make a long story short, I lost. He banked in a 3. It was ridiculous. It had no business going in, but it did. And he was thrilled. I was not thrilled. And as soon as the shot went in, he looks at me and I see he's got this, big smile on his face, and I'm on fire on the inside. I'm furious. And so I take the ball and I just punt it, right? Which is the logical thing to do. And the ball goes like into a sump. And if you don't know what a sump is, it's this gigantic hole that's surrounded by a barbed wire fence. And so he looks at me and goes, great, now you got to go in the sump and get the ball. And I was so angry at this point that I turned around and punched a pole, the basketball hoop, punched it. So now I had lost the game, I had lost the ball, and my hand was broken. I almost missed my entire basketball season. I was out for the whole fall. And like that, obviously that's a ridiculous story. And then I had to like explain that to my parents, And it wasn't something I was proud of. But this for me was like such a clear picture of this is what acting on anger produces. You could have lost and gone and practiced, but instead, like you let that energy, like gave full vent to the anger. And now I've made a mess for myself. And so like maybe if you're a visual person, like right, last week we had the ladder. When you think of what acting on anger produces, right, here's a little picture. I think I'm gonna hang this up in my garage just to remind me, all right? It's a hole in the wall. You ever put a hole in the wall? It's great. It's a real great feeling because then it's like, well, we were arguing about whether or not I vacuumed the pool, and now I have a sheetrock project. It never leads to anything good. It doesn't do anything for you. And now it's created a mess. And maybe you have literally put a hole in the wall. Or maybe like your hole in the wall is an insult to a person that you love, right? Maybe your hole in the wall is a spouse that feels totally unappreciated because you were hurt, and in that moment, you let your anger get the best of you, and you said this, but you didn't mean it. Maybe there's a little bit of truth, but now there's a big mess to clean up because there's some real damage that's been done. Maybe your hole in the wall is a lost job because there was some little conflict. There was some little issue, and instead of just putting it on the table and acting with a level head, right? Like the anger got the best of us, and though it showed you, like, I want justice, I didn't do, and maybe it got the best of you. It showed you what you wanted, but it didn't get you what you want. It just made a mess. It put a hole in the wall. Maybe your hole in the wall is a broken relationship. I mean, I'm sure. There are more holes in my walls than I can count. Not literal holes, but things I've done, things I've said where I'm angry and where really I should just press pause, just delay my anger, just like take another step. Oh, here it goes. And boom, now I got a mess to clean up. Something that has nothing to do with the issue has just made more of a mess than it needed to. This is what James is saying. It is not, you might be angry, but it will not take you to where you want to go. Maybe there have been times in your life where you feel like anger is getting you what you want. And maybe it takes a little bit of time for you to realize that it's not. Right? Like I was talking to someone not too long ago who said, when he comes home from work, it's really important that things are in order in the house. And you get mad. Get mad if he came home and the kids were going crazy and the house was upset, like messy, and he would get mad. And so he started coming home and the house was clean. And for a little while, he was getting what he wanted. Until one day he had a hard conversation. He was told, do you know everyone in the house is on edge when it comes time for you to get home, to come home? Like, Is that what you want? Did that produce something that you're proud of? This isn't like a shame on you, you're wrong when you act on anger. It's like, this road is not going to take you where you want to go. Now, maybe you've heard of this concept called righteous anger, right? It's when you see injustice and something needs to be done about it. Maybe it's like big injustice like out in the world, or maybe it's just something that needs to be righted, a wrong that needs to be righted. Like maybe you're a parent and you come home and there's your kids have turned the house upside down and done something and it need to be corrected. And you're angry and something needs to be said because you're right. A rule has been broken. Or maybe you're in an argument with your significant other and they crossed a line, they broke one of the rules you said you weren't gonna do, but then they did it, and you're angry and you're in the right and you're justified. I would argue that not acting in that anger will end up better for you than just acting in the moment. Fine, if you're upset with your kids because they broke the rules, you can come home and just let them know. Right? Or you can take a step back and be like, you know what, I'm going to take a walk around the block. I'm going to take a deep breath, and then I'm going to come in with a level head and address the fact that something went wrong and we need to fix it. I bet you're way less likely to say something you're going to want to take back. Anger, it's like fire. It can spread, it can build, it can flare up, and it can cause a whole world of damage that you never wanted it to cause. It doesn't produce, it doesn't get us what we want. And so I'm going to call the band up here, we'll wrap up. But my question then for you is, what is disturbing your peace? For me, it's anger. Anger disturbs my peace. It's not that I've been mistreated. It's when I act in anger because I've been mistreated. It's not that I've been insulted. It's because I act on that anger that I have from being insulted. It's not that I feel trapped in a plane. It's not that I feel controlled. It's not that I feel manipulated. It's that I act on the anger, and that disturbs my peace. And so as we look ahead to this year, 2022, especially as it pertains to anger, if 2022 is going to be a year that is defined for you by peace, dominated for you by peace, then really we have to define what we want. Do you want to be in control? Or do you want peace? Do you want to be right? Or do you want peace? Do you want to get them back, put them in their place, retaliate, make a point? Or do you want peace? If we want 2022 to be a year dominated by peace, then take note of this, my dear brothers and sisters. All of us should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Because when we let anger in, we push peace out.